All right. Now, okay. All right. So today we're going to be talking about this particular intervention. It's called Specialized Program, Individualized Reading Excellence, and the acronym is Spire. And you'll just hear us refer to it as Spire all the time. And you see my information. I am Denise Gibbs, and I work with the Alabama Scottish Rite Foundation. And there's my email address on this first slide. And we also have a website at the Scottish Rite Foundation Learning Centers. And so you'll be able to go to that website and you'll see additional trainings that we've recorded, webinars, whatever, about different aspects of dyslexia. And it also gives you ideas of other webinars that we could do for you if you wanted to do that. This is the information about the Alabama Scottish Rite Foundation. I've already shared this with you, but they are a philanthropy. They're part of the Masons, and at no cost to schools ever, they provide trainings. And our particular area of philanthropy is working with students who struggle in reading because they have failed the dyslexia screening in Alabama. I have put together for you a shared Google Drive folder that if you want that folder, you'll just go to tinyurl.com and then /DG-Spire-training. That folder will open up for you. So if you brought your technology and want to go ahead and get that, please do. That's just fine. What you'll find inside that folder is you will find that we have handout materials, we have the placement test is there, this presentation is there, and I have sample lessons there for you to use. And ideally, you would all have this. So I'm going to open that folder so that you can see it live. All right. We'll make that get larger for us so that you can see it better. Okay. So you see you've got handout materials, you've got the placement test, which you received when you came in the door. The placement test was right here at the sign-in sheet, so you have a copy of the placement test with you. All right. The other thing that you have is you have the letter that Morgan County has created for you. That is the letter. It's back and front. On one side, it's the letter that you are required to send out to parents by the administrative code now. You're required to notify parents if their child fails a dyslexia screening, and then you're also required to tell them what services you're providing them, and then to provide them with progress monitoring information at periodic intervals. We do the progress monitoring information to families probably just like what you do with your other RTI services, which is we send this information to parents with the progress report that goes out in the middle of the grading period and with the report card. So if a child is in dyslexia intervention, they'll get this progress report, the parent will, at the same time they get the report card and the mid-grading period progress report. You got a copy of the letter and you also got a copy of the placement test when you signed in. But let's just look at the folder, at the things that you've got right here. And so the handout materials, I've got several things that I will link to during the course of our talk today, our time together. We've got different assessment pieces that are part of Spire that make this a really nice intervention for you to be able to implement, because when you're talking about progress monitoring, Spire has progress monitoring data built into it, so that as part of implementing the Spire program, you will be able to just collect the data that you have to for the program anyway, and then put that together in the note that you send home to the parents about how their child is doing. And we'll go over how that all happens as we go along. I've got a scope and sequence for you and several other things in this folder. And so the placement test, which I don't really have to open, but because I think you have a copy of all of it, but there are 3 parts to it. There's the score form that you use for when you're giving it to a child. This is what you will score it with. Then you also have instructions for it, and then you have the pages that the child looks at with the words that they're going to be reading. So all those materials are included in that Google Drive folder for you. The presentation from today is there, and you've got it in PDF format. You've also got it as a PowerPoint. So if you needed to share this with anybody, you will have access to doing that. And then you also have sample lessons. And I've got a short E lesson, which is an introductory lesson. There are two kinds of lessons in Spire. You have introductory lessons whenever I'm introducing a brand new concept, like we've never talked about short E in our intervention before, but today's the day we start. Then you do the introductory lesson to short E. Then tomorrow you do the reinforcement lesson, the first reinforcement lesson for short E. And you have reinforcement lessons A, B, C, D, and E. So you have about 5 reinforcement lessons for every concept. You don't have to do all 5 reinforcement lessons. You will be able to decide based on how your kids are doing how many reinforcement lessons you need to do. Sometimes you only need to do 1 reinforcement lesson and they got it. And the way you'll know they got it is they will be at 80% mastery of the short E words that you are showing them. Now we're going to go over all of this. So this is just like sort of like a previews of coming attractions. So all of the details that I'm talking about right now, right this minute I'm giving you the big picture. We'll go into the details as we move along. So I have an example of a reinforcement lesson, and I have an example of an introductory lesson. So that's what's in your shared Google Drive folder. And if I think of other things as we go through the year that would be helpful for me to share with you, I will add those to that folder, and you'll still have access to all those. So as I do Spire trainings around the state, and I do many of those, then what I'll do is I'll put whatever I think would be helpful in there. And so there may be things that show up in your shared folder that weren't even here today. So just know that you might check back with it. I don't think that I have it set necessarily to automatically give you a notice when I put something in the folder, but you can probably set that on your end with the Google Drive folders. All right, so let's talk about what is Spire. And as we get ready to talk about Spire, I'm going to just tell you that it is a super powerful, those are my words, super powerful intervention that is multisensory, research-based, meets all of the requirements in the Alabama Administrative Code for what a dyslexia-specific intervention has to be. And it's based on the Orton-Gillingham methodology. And that's named after Dr. Samuel T. Orton and Mrs. Anna Gillingham. And they created these materials many years ago. Not the Spire materials, but the Orton-Gillingham materials. And this Spire program was developed by Sheila Clark Edmonds, who is a fellow in the Orton-Gillingham Academy for educators and practitioners. And so Mrs. Edmonds developed this so that we, who aren't necessarily years of training with Orton-Gillingham completed, but but we would like to be able to help children with dyslexia, we can do the basically same kind of intervention that she would do. So she created this so that it's easy for us to do an Orton-Gillingham type lesson effectively because of the way she organized the materials. So that's the main thing about Spire. And what I want to do is take us briefly to the Spire website. And let me see about this. Okay. All right. So Spire now comes in 2 kinds of materials. It comes in the print materials, which you guys have ordered for Morgan County, and it also has some digital support materials that work on iPads and other kinds of devices as well. My experience has been that the print materials are totally excellent, and I don't know that we would even get a lot out of the digital part necessarily. So when Dr. Humphrey and I were talking about ordering the materials for you guys, I kind of encouraged her to go with the print materials. So that's what we've ordered for you guys. So I'm going to click on print materials, and it'll open the materials that that you'll see. Now, when I clicked on that, I went to the Spire website, and when you get the PowerPoint onto your device, you'll be able to, all the links should work. So you should be able to follow these links just as well when you're looking at the PowerPoint. The links, for some reason, don't work, of course, if you're doing the PDF version of this. But if you're looking at the PowerPoint version of it, then the links all work. So you can go here as well. But this is EPS schools or school specialty, EPS books or school specialty, and that's the publisher for Spire. And I'm in the part that is the about the program part. And this is an important screen for me to show you because it has a lot of stuff that I want you to see. It has a lot of free downloadable materials that you can get and have access to that will help you immensely. The placement test is free. You download it from this particular place on the internet. So if you clicked that, you would get the placement test parts. Now, I've obviously already taken those and put them in the shared Google Drive folder for you. So you would have access to it either directly from their website or from that Google Drive that you have. They also have sample lessons. This is where I got the lessons that I shared with you for this. You've got short E, and you've also got reinforcement lesson from level 2, which is TCH or trigraph TCH, which as we know says ch. All right. Then you have some amazing things down here under customer resources. You have a lot of videos and materials that will show you parts of the program and how to do it. Because when I tell you how to do it, it'll be one thing. But when you see somebody do it, a lot of people really get it from seeing what it looks like when a teacher is doing it. So if you want to see what these different things look like, this is a great place to go to be able to see the different steps in the program. And that comes under video quick start lessons, and you want to look toward that. Then there's this, which says view on-demand webinar presented by Julie Ross, who is the Spire national trainer. And you'll click on this link. It'll ask you to fill out some information to identify who you are, because they're happy to share it with you, but they'd like to know who they're sharing it with. And in this video, this webinar, Julie shows you how to do Spire as well. So you can look at what I'm doing with you today, and then you can also look at Julie's presentation, so you can have this Spire training from any number of angles that you want to. And that the company, because they want this program to be easily administered by schools all across the country, they've tried to make this very user-friendly. And so you can watch this webinar whenever you want to by just logging in and checking it out. If you look down, and I like this one especially, if you look down at the videos, and I'm going to have to pause the first one because the sweet lady will start talking to us. Okay, down here where it says Level 3 ED Introductory Lesson, that's the whole lesson. So when you look at that one, you will see an entire Spire lesson from start to finish with all 10 steps. So if you wanted to see a Spire lesson with her manipulating the materials, using the teacher's guide, the students using their materials, all together, there it is. So I've done a lot of interventions in the years that I've been working with children with dyslexia, and I'll tell you, I don't know of one that has better teacher support in terms of helping you feel comfortable about how you're implementing this intervention. So what I'm going to suggest to you is please avail yourselves of the things at this website, because I hope we're going to do a Jim Dandy training for you today, and that you will leave feeling all empowered and ready to jump in and start doing this the first of school. But if you feel a little shaky, you can back yourself up by looking at any of these materials. So you want to just click on some of these and you'll see what things are available at the Spire website. All right, so back to our PowerPoint. Okay. So the other things that are kind of unique about Spire that I want to point out to you, one of the reasons, and this is typical of all Orton-Gillingham interventions, is that the instruction that we do when we're teaching the child to identify a letter and to learn the sound that goes with the letter, we do that in a multi-sensory kind of way. And it is with this multi-sensory teaching that's the key that gets the information into the child, whereas in earlier efforts to teach the child, they miss that. Because the kids that are going to fail your dyslexia screening, and they may be at all different grade levels, we know they've already had phonics instruction. Somebody way back when they were in kindergarten and first grade tried to teach them how to match up the letters and the sounds and sound words out and look at the syllables and do the whole word and all that. But for some reason, it did not sink in with this child. They didn't get it. As they learned one thing, they forgot the one they did the day before or the week before. And so they've had this, but it didn't stick. And so this sticks with children who fail your dyslexia screening because of the multisensory nature of it. So they're going to be, when you learn a sound or you learn a letter and the sound that goes with it, we don't just tell you what it is and then you just have to get it. But instead, we have you write it, and you write it in your hand so that you can feel it. All right, so everybody take your finger of your writing hand and in your non-writing hand, and we're going to make the letter B, like for B. And so we're going to say pull straight down, curve around, right, and close. B. Pull straight down, curve around right, and close. So that's the B, and you feel what it feels like. All right, so you're going to have them write the sound in their hand. And then you're going to have them, all right, now keep your hand where you can see it. This is kind of neat. And now take your pencil in your writing hand and let's write it on our paper. So then they write it on their paper. Sometimes they write it in the air and they make it big. Okay, so this is multi-sensory teaching where you're learning the letter, you're learning what the letter feels like, what the motion to make the letter feels like, what it looks like when you write it, and what it sounds like when you repeat it. Because every time you write it, you're going to say B, 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 B. And the instructions to you to say to the children are all in a scripted teacher's manual. So that you don't have to just like remember from today how to do this. Your teacher's manual will literally have a word for word verbatim script that you follow with your students, which to me is phenomenal. Because what that does is that allows me to get into a good comfort zone of how to do this instruction in a multisensory way. And then as I get comfortable with it, I don't have to read every word in the script because now I really know how to do it. But in the first 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, I needed that script or I would have forgot to say, get your hand out and write it in your hand. Say the letter, say the sound. Now write it on the paper. I wouldn't have remembered all those steps maybe. But after I've done it for a couple of weeks, I got it. And now I can substitute my own words as long as I get them to do that. So what we say is I want you to think of this as a soft script. It's a very definite script that you could follow all year verbatim, reading it out of the teacher's manual if that was your comfort zone. But you can also, at the point that you are confident that you can do it just like it's intended, then you can kind of get a little bit away from that script and use some of your own kind of comfortable words. And so what'll happen is you will reach the point that the script is there for comfort and backup, but that you really can do this kind of instruction, which I don't know of very many interventions that give you a script like this that lets you practice doing it exactly right. And then when you get there, now you're on your own if you want to be. But they give you scripts for all levels of Spire. So to me, that's just phenomenal. So that's what we mean by it's scripted and very tightly organized. Now, it only works if you do it with fidelity. And that means there are 10 steps in every Spire lesson, except for the pre-level, which is called Sound Sensible, that we use for kindergarten. And it doesn't have 10 steps. It has 5 steps, okay? And their 5 steps are 9 minutes each, and it's supposed to be 45 minutes to do a Sound Sensible lesson, okay? It has a wonderfully organized set of materials, and you've got those if you were working in a school that has kindergarten in it, because this would be the level of Spire that we might use in kindergarten should a student fail the dyslexia screening in kindergarten. And while I keep saying fail the dyslexia screening, I want to make a point to you that I want to really go deep to your heart, and that is when we are required by the code now to screen children for dyslexia, I want you to understand that when we screen you for dyslexia and you fail the screening, we have not diagnosed you with dyslexia. We have not diagnosed you with dyslexia. I'm not saying to this mama, your child has dyslexia. All I could say is we have a screening that's recommended by the state, and your child has performed in a way on that screening that tells us they need this kind of reading support and this kind of help. That's what the screening does. It tells you the child is likely to benefit from this kind of RTI dyslexia support. That's all it tells you. It doesn't say they are dyslexic. To be able to say that a child is dyslexic, you would have to do a dyslexia evaluation. Now, I am working with the State Department right now on plans to get us to that next level for students who do not progress with our dyslexia services in general education. So that if you have a child who's getting this dyslexia specific intervention as part of RTI, which is part of general ed, you don't have to qualify for it. You don't have to have a huge amount of evaluations to receive these services. You just have to fail the screening, okay? Usually what will happen is you'll fail your universal screening that your district is doing, whether that's Global Scholar, whether that's STAR, whatever you're doing. You fail that screening, and then we give you the second round of screening for dyslexia, and we look at certain skills. Now, I'm coming on Thursday to your mini mega conference, and I'll be talking about that part. We're not talking about that part today, but I'm talking about that part on Thursday. So anyway, but they don't have dyslexia because they failed the screening. Are you good with that? All right, and I don't want you to feel uncomfortable, like, I don't feel like I'm qualified to diagnose dyslexia. That's not what you just did. You just performed a screening, which is easy, which is designed to be given by any classroom teacher. And then you learn from the screening that this child has a pattern of performance that says this intervention would probably be good for you. Question?
Is every child screened or only children that are identified as maybe needing screening?
The way this needs to feel is every child in your county is screened as part of RTI for reading and for math. And so that universal screening that is required as part of RTI for all children, okay, that is done for everybody. And then the ones that we follow up with a dyslexia screening are those that fail to reach the district's benchmark on the universal screening. I'll use STAR as an example. Some districts are using STAR as their universal screening for reading. And if a child scores below the district benchmark, and in most districts that benchmark is being, for RTI purposes, is being set at 25th percentile. So if they score below the 25th percentile, or let's say if they score below the 25th percentile on the Global Scholar, if that's what you're using as your universal screening, then you follow up with a dyslexia screening. So not every child is screened for dyslexia, only those that fail the universal screener. So we have I'm thinking of it as a two-step screener. And so actually the universal screener is the first part of the dyslexia screening, and you have to fail that to then move to the other parts. And so technically, the code says children in Alabama, all children in Alabama will be screened for dyslexia. And they are being, because the first piece of the screening is the universal screening. Okay, so when you ask that question, I have to be careful because the answer is yes, all children are screened for dyslexia, except you had to fail the first part of the screening, which is the universal screening, for us to move on to the other 4 skills that we look at in the dyslexia screening. Okay?
And one of the things that ARI had mentioned, because some districts, especially in Mobile, are noticing that 25%, there's a huge amount that already failing that portion of that huge screener, or the whole picture. So suggestions from them is using the bottom 10%. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that what that needs to be is it needs to be a district decision in terms of what your benchmark for universal screening is. If Morgan County were to decide our universal screening benchmark is going to be, you have to score below the 10th percentile for us to serve you with RTI, okay? Then that's what you would do. You would only screen for dyslexia those children who score below the 10th percentile. But if Morgan County has 25th percentile as your benchmark for your universal screening, then by law you have to screen for dyslexia anybody who scores below that benchmark. So if you want 10th percentile, you need to officially set 10th percentile as the benchmark for your district for the reading screening. Does that make sense?
And that's something that we had our dyslexia training this summer with ARI. So those are things that we decided that we would do for the district.
Yeah.
10%.
So you're using 10th percentile as the universal screening benchmark. Okay, and that's fine. Whatever the district decides to use for their universal screening benchmark, if they score below that, they get dyslexia screening. And as long as you're consistent with that, it's fine. I worked in a district, Tennessee, and they had that same thing that you're talking about. Too many kids were failing screening. And so they took and said, this year, we're doing 10th percentile. Because we've demonstrated when you get so many children scoring below the 25th percentile, y'all, what that tells you is your core reading instruction is messed up. It is not what it ought to be. Because what it means is children in this county are not keeping up with the nation, because the average range to get a kid to grade level proficiency or average range of performance is 25th percentile to 75th percentile. That's the average range, 74th percentile. So 25th to 74th is the average range. That's where 50% of all children in the nation score. And if we have so many kids that are scoring way below that, it says our core reading is not good. And we've got to do things to intensify our core reading instruction. So what that district in Tennessee did is the first year they were doing this, yes, they used 10th percentile. And they had a plan. And they said, and next year it's going up to 15th percentile, because we know our focus is going to not just be on this intervention, but it's going to be on intensifying our core instruction so that we don't have so many children scoring in that below the 10th percentile. Yes?
My question is, for the lower grades, are we talking about the Syllables, or are we talking about our newest universal screening that we have to start again?
We're getting a new formative assessment, NWEA. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that's going to be something that is being rolled out this year. So on the parent letters, you'll notice as far as documentation that you would use to make a decision, it says NWEA and STAR. Some schools are still using STAR. Some schools don't have STAR. But if you do have STAR, that is something that you could use in addition to that.
What about Syllables?
For kindergarten, Dibbles
Yes.
is definitely a good screening. And if you're using Dibbles for your K through 2 grades, and you're already getting that, then what the code says, any student who scores below benchmark, it doesn't say well below benchmark, it says below benchmark. And we had a great discussion about that. So in the code, it says below benchmark. And if you're using something like Dibbles that provides for you the numbers of letters they have to name to be in the below benchmark, you can't really alter that. You really have to go with what Dibbles said to say these are the ones who did that. Otherwise, I think you really are in violation of what the code says. Now, the other tools, we get to say what the district benchmark is, okay? With Dibbles, it's already established by the people in Oregon. Now, and we had originally said well below benchmark, which was my preference. And last year, the folks at the State Department came back and did some revision and said it needs to just say below benchmark, not well below. And I went like, okay. And so that was how the State Department swapped that around. And so it says below benchmark. Now, here's the catch-22 about that. And I will talk about this in detail. We've got time to talk about it now, but I will talk about this in detail on Thursday, because I'm talking a lot about screening on Thursday. But what really we've got to sort of see is that for those children that we use Dibbles as our universal screening, our K-1-2 kids, if they're in kindergarten, their performance on that screening is the dyslexia screening. Because the dyslexia screening for kindergarten is just the 4 Dibbles skills. It's letter naming, letter sound, phonemic seg, nonsense word. It's those 4 skills. We don't screen for dyslexia in the fall of kindergarten, ever. We screen at winter and not before. Okay? No screening of kindergarten for dyslexia, okay, in the fall when you start to school.
Until winter, is that what you just
Until
said?
the winter benchmark.
K is not assessed until winter.
Correct. They would go ahead and take Dibbles like normal in the fall when they come back to school or whatever, and you would do whatever you've always done with kids who score low on Dibbles. You do interventions, you do extra small group time with them, differentiated instruction, all that good stuff, and that's wonderful. Then when you rescreen them in the winter, when y'all give it in December before they get out, or January, however y'all do it, then at that moment, the ones who score below benchmark get a dyslexia screening. But in kindergarten, the dyslexia screening is Dibbles, or could be Dibbles. So that's pretty cool because you don't really have to do anything else. So that's neat for kindergarten. That's not true for first grade and second grade. You can use Dibbles as the universal screening for first and second grade, but not for the dyslexia screening. The dyslexia screening for first and second grade is the 4 skills that we ask everybody to look at, and that is read a grade level passage with a certain % accuracy, read nonsense words, read real words, and spell. It's those 4 skills. And we've got all kind of formats for you to put that all out there. Lots of assessment tools and that kind of thing. So,
Say those again, please.
yeah. So on your screening, your dyslexia screening for grades 1 through 12, there are 4 skills. They have to read a grade level passage. Second grader reads a second grade passage. First grader reads a first grade passage, and all the way up the tree. So they read a grade level passage, and then the second thing is they read nonsense words. Okay? So they read nonsense words, and that looks at phonemic decoding. So that's how they're learning the sounds and the letters and that sort of thing. Not nonsense words from Dibbles, because Dibbles doesn't go up to second grade for nonsense words. So you can't use Dibbles. You have to use another tool for nonsense words, one that gets to multisyllabic words and that does silent E words and that does vowel pairs and other kinds of skills, because Dibbles only does consonant, vowel, consonant. It just does short vowels. That is not a good screening for first and second grade, as you would imagine. Okay, so you have to not use Dibbles to screen the dyslexia screening part for first grade and second grade, but you have to use this other protocol that we'll talk about Thursday. So, but you've got nonsense words, then you've got real words, so they read real words, and then, so it's passages, nonsense words, real words, and then spelling. We look at those 4 skills. And you have to have been scoring in the danger zone on 3 of those 4 skills to fail the screening. So if you scored in the at-risk zone, and we'll look at forms that we've developed to help you with that when we're here on Thursday, then at that point, that's when you say they failed the screening. 3 out of 4 in what now I can refer to as the gray boxes. Okay? So on the screening form that we have developed, that is in the Dyslexia Resource Guide. Okay, those things all got put in the Resource Guide just about 2 weeks ago. Okay, so, all right. So we've screened the children for dyslexia, but that doesn't mean we've diagnosed them with dyslexia. The point at which a child in Alabama schools, I think, ought to be diagnosed with dyslexia is they've gone through the screening, they've received the intervention, it did not make them reach the level of proficiency that we needed them to be, so they're still reading in the danger zone after considerable, intensive dyslexia intervention. They didn't grow like the other children grew. So now they're going to probably have a referral for consideration for more intensive and individualized interventions, and that would come from special education. So we might make a special education referral just like we would with any other RTI Tier 3 kid who's not growing. We do that with our dyslexic children, and what I am hopeful is that as part of the evaluation for consideration for special education, we'll go ahead and assess the few little skills that are lacking in our dyslexia screening to be able to make the diagnosis of dyslexia. And then we will have the child identified as having a specific learning disability and understand that the likely underlying cause is in fact dyslexia, which is totally and absolutely consistent with what the federal government is now telling us we ought to do. So that's what I'm hoping we'll put forth as a special ed policy down the road in Alabama. And so I've started working with the special ed folks in Montgomery on exactly coming up with how we want to see this happen and roll out statewide. But the diagnosis of dyslexia does not occur as part of RTI. That's the main thing I want y'all to take away from that. Okay? All right. Now, okay. Yes.
I just want to make sure I understand what you said. On the part about that we would not screen them until after the winter assessment or determine that they would be screened, was that just for kindergarten?
Yes,
Okay.
just for kindergarten. Just for kindergarten. Kindergarten students do not get screened for dyslexia regardless of their performance on the fall benchmark, but they do get screened for dyslexia if their performance on the winter benchmark says they are scoring in the below benchmark area on Dibbles or whatever we're using for kindergarten. Yes?
What's it say to you that at the end of kindergarten, which is when we got around to doing all of these things last year, and everybody, every kindergartner would be dyslexic.
Wow. So, all right, the question was,
I mean, almost.
what does it say to me if at the end of kindergarten, almost all of the kindergarten students at a school or in a district or whatever are scoring below the Dibbles benchmark that you're using as your screening tool? It would say to me that you're going to have to rethink your kindergarten curriculum, your core kindergarten curriculum for reading, and you're going to have to do some things so that your children reach the benchmarks that are nationally determined and indicate that the child is well on the way to becoming successful. Because it's almost like a domino effect. If they are performing that way at the end of kindergarten, that means the first grade teachers get them and they're not really ready. And they've got to do just an amazing lot of growth at the first grade level because they didn't come to first grade reaching the kindergarten benchmarks. That is not something that means all the kids in your county are dyslexic or fail the dyslexia screening. What it really means is you have to work on your core instruction in the grade that had that as an outcome. And that is true in more schools in America than you would imagine. And one of the good things about RTI really is that it gives us insights into what part of the system needs adjustment. And we wouldn't ever try to fix the problem by having huge numbers of kids in intervention. Because if nobody is growing, the fact that you didn't grow doesn't mean anything, except that the instruction wasn't effective. But if most kids are growing and reaching benchmark, then the fact that you didn't says, hey, you may have something that needs help through intervention. Does that make sense? When I've worked I've written several books about RTI. I even wrote a PST manual for the state of Alabama that was available on the state website for a while. And it gave some guidance about how districts might want to pursue their RTI efforts. But as I've worked as a regional, national, whatever consultant about RTI, what I have really come to understand is that when you get that initial screening results, what you must do is look at the proportion of children who are scoring below the benchmark. And so if you, for example, your benchmark was 25th percentile, and so it should be that 25% of all children in your county would score below the 25th percentile, because that's just the way percentile works nationwide. So if you had 25% scoring in that level, you would be right. Then you give the dyslexia screening to that 25%, and guess what? 5%, 10% fail the dyslexia screening. 25% fail the STAR or whatever you were talking about, but only 5 or 10% fail the dyslexia screening once you gave it. Okay. Yeah. So what that tells you is that because of the nature of the dyslexia screening and the instruction that's being provided, if you have largely more than numbers of children that match up to the national percentiles, like if you use 10th percentile, only 10% of your children should score below the 10th percentile. Districts, when they have much larger numbers than that score below, say, the 25th percentile, maybe 50% of your children score below the 25th percentile. Well, of course, you're not going to put 50% of your children in intervention, okay? What most authorities in RTI would say is you should never have to put more than 25% of your children in any intervention. And if it does look like that, the problem is not one that can be fixed with intervention. It is, you've got to go back to the drawing board and look at tier 1 and say, what can we do? Now, y'all, you know, I'm sure, that we are such a mixed array of kiddos all over the place, you know, and you're going to have some kids who come to kindergarten and they have never even drank out of a water fountain. You know, they don't even know how to flush a toilet, okay? So, and of course, nobody's ever read to them. And so they don't have that early literacy foundation built. And then you go to other schools somewhere or another neighborhood somewhere, let's say, and everybody is ready. Now, it's real easy if everybody is ready to get them to the next level. But if they all came in terrible, then you really have a lot of ground to cover. And all I'm going to say is, the real thinking is that you have to grow the flowers in your garden. So whatever your garden is like, you may have yucky soil, okay? You got to learn what the fertilizer is and what the minerals are you got to put in that soil so those flowers will blossom. Because all of us should be able to have a pretty garden after they've had access to us. And that's why being a teacher is such an important mission. And it's not something that is for the faint-hearted. Because we're not all raising children that come from gardens that had rich soil. Some of them had very limited soil. They maybe had rocks and sand. And we got to go in and just put some topsoil to just get started. Okay? All right. So yeah, it just says, wow, we've got a real core instruction problem. And I think that I've worked in districts as an RTI consultant where we put the interventions in place and we did it for the bottom 10% of children because we could do that and we felt comfortable with that and it wasn't going to sink the ship. But then we had to spend a lot of our energy on tier 1 because we weren't going to stay at 10% forever. What we wanted was that, below the 25th percentile, we had 25% or fewer of our children scoring below the 25th percentile. At that point, you become comfortable using 25th percentile, okay? So the 10th percentile should be a temporary fix, not a permanent thing where we just say, we don't care if kids in our district don't read very well. We had crummy soil, and if they're going to be that way when they graduate too. See what I'm saying? You've got all these years to try to beef up the soil and have better flowers. Okay, so all right, so here's how Spire works. The children are going to be in small group intervention classes every day, 5 days a week, and the group can be anywhere from 2 to 6 children, okay, 2 to 6 children. And it's designed for children who read with not good accuracy, who when they're reading something, there's a lot of words that they read incorrectly. So what I've given you there is my thought about Spire forever has been that any child who reads a grade level passage with less than 95% accuracy, their failure to read the words correctly is really what's the underlying problem of their reading problem. Now, a lot of times we'll say, particularly with kids in 3rd and 4th grade and beyond, well, I think his reading is okay. He just doesn't comprehend what he's reading. We think it's that he doesn't comprehend. But one of the things that happens is as kids get older, we are less consistent, I think, in listening to them read and measuring the accuracy with which they're reading. And when a child is reading 100 words and makes 5 errors, he will not comprehend what he's reading. There's research that proves that. In fact, for older students at a middle school level who are reading content information for which they don't have huge interest or background knowledge, they need to be reading with 97 to 98% accuracy. So at least 95% accuracy. 5 words in 100 to read wrong means you don't comprehend what you're reading, and no, you won't get the main idea. No, you won't be able to do the details. You won't be able to do inferences. But if I try to work with you on details and inferences and main idea, guess what? You don't get it still. Nothing I do is going to help you get where you comprehend better until I help you read the words accurately. So we have to appreciate the fact that if they read with less than 95% accuracy, Houston, we have a problem, and we got to fix that problem before we can see growth in any reading skills. So Spire is for children who don't read words accurately. If I have a child who, on my dyslexia screening, takes that 5th grade passage or 4th grade passage and reads it with 97% accuracy, I'm going to do the rest of the screening, but I'm going to know that it's very unlikely that this kid would need Spire, okay? I'm going to know that because Spire is for kids who don't read words accurately. That's it in a nutshell. And what does it mean, don't read words accurately? With less than 95% accuracy. Okay, so there are 8 levels of Spire for grades 1 through 12, and then there is a pre-level for your kindergarten students. Some 1st and 2nd grade students may actually test in to Sound Sensible. Sound Sensible, which is the pre-level, works on only consonants and short vowel A. That's all it does in Sound Sensible. When you get to level 1, it moves on. Now we're about to look at the scope and sequence of Spire on some slides, and I'll talk to you more about that. Now what Spire has as its rule is that we have introductory lessons, and then we have reinforcement lessons, and we don't go to the next introductory lesson, teach them the next skill, until they are at least 80% accurate with the skill that we're working on right now. So if I'm teaching you short E, you got to reach 80% mastery of that, and we'll look at some the little progress monitoring measures that we give every day in Spire to be able to know, well, yes, they're at 80%. They're beyond 80%. And so now we're ready to move on to the next concept. So it allows me, I could start 2 groups of children out with Spire at the very same time, y'all. And one group does an introductory lesson and a reinforcement lesson, and they're done. And that happens with every concept, because I've got some little pistols in there, and they are rocking and rolling, and they are moving fast, and I don't have anybody that's what I would describe as a straggler, okay? My children in this group go fast, and that group goes fast. So I start the 2 groups off exactly at the same place. This group needs 2 lessons. My other group needs 5 lessons for each concept. So they're going to get apart from each other. One group's going to go fast, one group's going to go slow. Do you get what I'm saying? So you just need to pay attention to that. One of the joys of Spire is you don't stay on something past the point that the children don't need it anymore. And if you get it in your head that you need to do all the reinforcement lessons, period, for all groups, you just messed up, because you really want to move when they're at 80%. Now, the trick for RTI implementation of Spire is you're going to have a group, let's say, of 6 children or 5 children. When the majority of those children reach 80%, move to the next level. So if I've got 5 in the group and 3 are there, then we're going to move to the next lesson, even though these 2 didn't. I'm not going to hang around with them until all of them make 80%. And that should be the rule of how we move through the Spire lessons in RTI. Now, if I did that and a student was consistently needing more than his group needed, because he's in one of those fast-moving groups, but he's a straggler kind of a kid, ideally, I could swap him to the straggler group. That would be ideal. I've got a group that does all 5 of them. I'm going to put you in that one. And if I could do that, hallelujah. But you know how schedules work and how arrangements work. You probably can't do that necessarily. That straggler group may be full. And so you don't really have that as an option. All right. But then we get to the end of whatever period of time we're willing to do this with students, and we're looking at their growth all along. And I've got these 2 students in this group who are not progressing. They are not progressing. And I can see their progress is at flat line. Then I would probably make a special ed referral for that child. And the discussion with the special ed eligibility folks would be, Spire may well be a good intervention for this child, but this child's going to need the maximum number of reinforcement lessons, and we weren't doing that with our RTI implementation. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's real important that we have in our heads that for RTI implementation, you're going to do it, the lesson on that concept, all the lessons, until the majority of the children reach 80%, then you're moving to the next lesson. And if these 2 got left behind, I'm going to pay attention to the fact that you're sort of weak with short E or whatever the concept was. So it's not like you're never going to see it again. You're going to see it in every single lesson from now on. And I'm going to do all kinds of things to try and pull you up. I'm going to send you extra fluency sheets to go home and read. I'm going to send lots of materials home for you to practice to try to bring you up to speed, or whatever I want to do. I'm going to work with your classroom teacher so that when your classroom teacher is doing small group differentiated in tier 1, that child gets a double dose of short E, because that was something he was lacking in his Spire implementation. So you can do all kinds of things to try to catch up your stragglers. And that's where it comes in really handy if you are in good communication with the classroom teacher. This is one who needs help with this. This one did not get vowel team EA. Every time he came to it, he was doing something different. And so that way you might be able to catch up those stragglers, and they won't need a special ed referral. If you do all those things and it still doesn't work, then you make a special ed referral. But the reality is that they may benefit from this same intervention, but at a slower pace. And in general ed, our rule is when the majority of the children are ready to move, we move, because this is not special ed. This is general ed, and we're going to go by this framework. And I have taught that in districts for the last 10 years, and it just works. It really works. My favorite district to talk about outcomes is Dyer County, Tennessee. They've used Spire for over 7 years now, and as their tier 3 dyslexia-specific intervention, just like you guys are going to do. And when we look particularly at their K through 3 data with Spire, what we're seeing is that they never have less than 89% of the children they are serving go and need no other intervention ever. And some years it's as high as 97% don't need any other intervention. So when you talk about an intervention that really works, when we wrote the dyslexia amendments and we decided we're going to try to do dyslexia in Alabama and do it all over the state, I wouldn't have felt happy about doing that if I didn't know about Spire. And if I didn't know this is an intervention we can put in the hands of classroom teachers and they will defeat these reading problems. And they will do it in a reasonable way, and there will be consistency across districts. So it's not like you've all got to go and take 2 years of training to become a dyslexia expert to be able to pull this off. That wouldn't be really doable, but this is really doable. So between 97% and 89% of the children served in K through 3 in Dyer County, Tennessee over the last 7 years, they have needed nothing other than Spire to reach grade level proficiency. And to be in Spire, because in Tennessee, you have to be, to get this level of intervention, you had to score below the 10th percentile. So every child in Spire in Dyer County started below the 10th percentile and exceeded 40th percentile while they were in the Spire intervention. Okay?
Dyer is a rural county.
It is a rural county. And it's a small county. They have 5 elementary schools. So they're smaller than y'all, I think. How many elementary schools do you guys have? 9. So they're about half the size of y'all. But they are a rural county with lots of poverty. Lots of poverty. They're right on the Mississippi River, just almost flipping over into Arkansas. Okay, and I hung out with them for the better part of 6 years as their RTI/dyslexia consultant. And I learned so much about how to make this work in that district that I really should have been paying them to let me come and learn with them. But another piece that you need to understand about Dyer County, they did not have the luxury of using classroom teachers as interventionists. They did not have necessarily certified teachers. Almost all of the interventionists in Dyer County are paraprofessionals. So paraprofessionals using Spire had an outcome of 89 to 97% fixed rate. Now, y'all, that gives you something to shoot for. So if you're not getting that, then you need to go back and look at those videos again and say, what am I not doing right? Because I'm not seeing that. And they were doing, like y'all are going to do, below the 10th percentile to get into Spire. Okay? All right. So that 80% piece is important. All right, now here's the scope and sequence. And, all right, so level 1 works on these things. And you're going to have a placement test that you're going to be able to administer to the students. You got a copy of it that will tell you this child should start at level 1. This child should start at level 2 over here. And then even level 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So level 1 works on these things: short vowels, A, E, I, O, and U, and enclosed syllables. So that consonant, vowel, consonant, or vowel, consonant. So they're working with the vowel in the initial or medial position, and they're working on consonant digraphs, SH, CH, TH, WH, in initial and medial positions. Then they're working on something called welded sounds with the NG and the NK, because when you put an NG and an NK in a syllable, because the N is touching the G or the K, it welds itself to the following sound, and it alters the way that N is pronounced. So you don't say think for think. You say think. Everybody say think. Think. And so really it's unk. And so it's unk because the N and the K are welded together, and it alters the way the N is pronounced. And so you're going to do welded sounds. The kind of text that you'll read will be something like you see here, the ink spot. Tim had a pen. The pen had red ink. Tim sat on his bunk. So everything in this passage is stuff that was built out of the skills that you've targeted in level 1. So you're not asked to read anything that you haven't been taught the concepts for. So it is totally decodable text. Does that make sense to you? Totally decodable. And that's what makes it different from any of the core reading programs that are out there. Because we teach a concept in first grade, and then we give them passages to read, and it has that concept and about 50 other concepts that they haven't learned yet. And for a lot of children, that's fine. They can sort of figure it out. But for children who fail the dyslexia screening, that's what's wrong with it. They need to have been taught it explicitly to be able to be successful with it. So level 2, we work on double consonants, FF, LL, and SS, like at the end of a short vowel word. We work on all, like in ball. We work on ah, like in wasp. We work on consonant combinations, QU, CK, and TCH. We work on magic E or silent E, however you want to call it. So this is when we finally get to see a long vowel. And then we work on vowel and magic E and vowel plus consonant plus E. So this is what the text looks like when you're looking at level 2. Yes?
When you are organizing your groups into your levels, would you have cross-grade level groups?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter age or just
No. You can have this particular level 2 group might have some second graders and some third graders in it. Okay? This particular level 1 group could have some first graders and some second graders in it, and maybe even third graders in it. Now, socially and just kids being nice to each other, you'll take into consideration how many grade levels you're comfortable spanning because of the social stuff. Okay? But I will tell you this, those older kids who are struggling so mightily, when they get into a Spire group and suddenly they're able to do it and to be successful, they become so nice and so appreciative and so kind that they don't even mind being in there with kids that are younger. But you use your judgment about how many grades, but I unequivocally know that 2 grade combinations are fine. When you start getting 3 and beyond, now it depends on the kiddos as to whether I want to let you in there with my little second graders, because you might not be that sweet. Okay, you might be a kid that's going to say, what's wrong with you? And we don't want any what's wrong with you when we're in these groups. Okay, all right. So that's level 2. Then you get to 3 and 4, and you see now we're going to have open accented syllables like so, he, and fly, where the vowel says its name. And then you're going to have closed syllable exceptions like ild, old, eind, ost, and all. You're going to have AY, so now we start to get to some vowel digraphs or vowel combinations. You're going to have the 3 sounds that Ed makes, because you know Ed can say Ed.
I'm gonna sneak up
You were
on
going to
you.
sneak up
I
on me.
was. How are you?
This is Granddaddy.
On Facebook?
You got that right.
That's
Don't
right.
I look so much older?
No, not even a bit. Not even a bit.
For dyeing my beard gray.
Is this your first grandchild that you keep posting about?
I'm not going to post it. It'd be my wife posting. But yes, it is my first grandchild. Oh, you done your hair different today. I see. That's good. All right. How are y'all?
Good.
It's good. It's good. Cool. There's a bunch of orders in here.
That's right. We got all kind of stuff we're gonna pass out, goodies at the end.
Yeah, there's somebody with this built a school. They said there's not enough storage in here, and I go, we know. It was built just like we meant, just like this. Yes, sir. Four in this one.
Yeah, I can get about 8:15. People were leaving then.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. I just want to holler.
Thanks for checking on us. You gotta come back and see me on Thursday. Okay, so, all right, so you see what levels 3 and 4 work on for us. And you see that the text is getting more complex. So I'll tell you that most of your elementary children are probably gonna test into level 1 or 2. That is pretty much real, okay? And beautifully, for a lot of those elementary kids, they have reached grade level proficiency and are reading and decoding with power after they have finished level 4 or level 5. So a lot of times I don't have to take them all the way to level 7 and 8, 6, 7, and 8, because they're reading so well by the time we finish level 4 or 5 that it's really hard to justify pulling them out for intervention anymore. And so it becomes a very difficult decision in some cases, but they become very masterful at how to look at words, break them into syllables, know what to do with a vowel, and then read the word accurately. And Spire is one of the strongest programs for teaching syllable types and how to take a word, break it into syllables. They're going to learn a lot of syllable division rules. You're going to see on here rabbit words where you have, and you'll see where we're targeting suffixes. And you'll see where we have twin consonant, like rabbit, R-A-B-B-I-T, and how you always divide between the 2 consonants. And you don't pronounce the consonant in the unaccented syllable. So it's never rabbit, but it's rabbit, okay? So that's how that's going to work. So, and as we move up, you can see that levels 5 and 6, now we're doing soft C and soft G. We're doing R-controlled vowels. We're doing trigraph D, G, E, although we did trigraph TCH pretty early on, but we don't get to D, G, E, like in judge, the word judge, until you get to level 5. And so you see that the text gets more complex. And then level 6, we've got the tomb of King Tut. And so they're reading text that's this complex. And then when you go to level 7 and level 8, you see what level 8 looks like. And so it gives you. Now, I want to tell you that the Spire levels aren't exactly matched up to grade level. Like, it's not really that if you can read everything in level 1, you're reading at a solid first grade level. Because when you look at it, you realize that we teach all those skills in the first 3 or 4 levels in first grade, don't we? So it's not really matched up to level 1 is first grade proficiency, level 2 is second grade proficiency, level 3. It's not exactly like that. In a good year of implementation of Spire, you should be able to cover 2 to 3 levels in one school year. So if you started in level 1, you should be about to level 4 by the end of the year if you are doing this effectively. Okay? Not doodling around too long, not. Y'all, when I've gone to observe people doing Spire in other states, not in Alabama, I'm going to say, but in other states, I'm always feel safe when I use other state examples, because then you don't have to worry. I wonder if she's talking about Madison County or she's talking about Huntsville City. I'm not. I'm talking about another state. Y'all, I would go in, and if I'm going to see somebody messing up, I will see them not doing the 10 steps in the lesson in one day. I will see them like getting stuck on step number 1 in this lesson, which you're supposed to do for 5 minutes, and instead they'll do it for 25 minutes. And when you see that, you go, and then a teacher might say to me, I'm just struggling with Spire because I never get finished with the lesson before our time is up. And I'll go, it's because you're spending too much time on the different steps. We're going to see how you're supposed to do that in just a second. But you really need to adhere to the recommended number of minutes in every step, okay? So your best practice for doing Spire, if your schedule will tolerate it, is going to be 5 days a week for 60 minutes a day. Now, a lot of you are going to look at that and say, we don't have an hour for intervention. At our school, we do not have the capability of doing an hour of intervention in a day, okay? And if you absolutely can't, then you have to go with one of these other arrangements. And in the teacher's manual, the publishers have given us 2 other ways to do Spire with fidelity, okay? This is another reason that I really like Spire for implementation in our schools, because it has flexibility, okay? But I've got in red that I wish you would wish that you could do it for an hour a day, 5 days a week. And if you can't, and you don't have good outcomes, another thing about Dyer County, they do an hour a day, 5 days a week. And the group size never exceeds 6. So they are like really ballistic about that. So it's 5 days a week for 60 minutes. And that means they do every step in the lesson, and they complete a lesson in one day. It takes 60 minutes to do all 10 steps in one day and be ready for the next lesson the next day. Now, if you don't have an hour, but you have 45 minutes, then Spire has a way for you to do a whole lesson in one day in 45 minutes. And the way they tell you to do that is, if it's an introductory lesson, you'll do steps 1 through 4. And if it is and then you'll do steps 7 through 10. So you'll do 1 through 4, you'll skip steps 5 and 6, and then finish up with 7 through 10, and you're out of there in 45 minutes. So you skip steps 5 and 6. And they have figured out that you will get fairly good outcomes with that arrangement as well. And you're still doing a whole lesson in one day, ready for the next lesson the next day. If it's a reinforcement lesson, you do steps 1 through 3, and then you do steps 5 through 10, and then you're out of there. So you skip step 4 in a reinforcement lesson. And the way it works is you come out still with about 45 minutes. Now, if you don't have 45 minutes and you only have 30 minutes, you won't do a whole lesson in a day. You'll do a half a lesson in a day. And then tomorrow you'll come in and you'll do the second half of that lesson. All right? So if you have 30 minutes, this is the way to do it. So on day 1, you'll do steps 1 through 5. And then on day 2, you'll come back in and you'll pick up with a sort of repeat of step 1, which is the phonogram cards. And then you'll do steps 6 through 10. So that's on the second day. So that's a way to do it in 30 minutes. Now, I want to be realistic and say, I want to present this in such a way for you that you will see all the possibilities of how you can make this work in your school. And I like it that they've given us these 3 formats, because that means everybody's got 30 minutes. I mean, if you don't have 30 minutes, you're not doing RTI. Okay? Now, a couple of little caveats. If you believe that when a child, because dyslexia intervention is going to be thought of as tier 3 in the RTI constellation of tiers. Dyslexia intervention will be at the tier 3 level. Okay? Now, a little bit of difference, though, is that if you fail the dyslexia screening, but you haven't already been in tier 2, I don't have to put you in tier 2, let you fail with that, and then put you in dyslexia intervention. The failing of the dyslexia screening rockets you right to tier 3, pass tier 2, and do not pass go, and do not have to spend all that time on an intervention that is very unlikely to be successful with you. All right? So because of failing the dyslexia screening, you can forego tier 2. You don't have to do tier 2. Because you failed the screening, you go to dyslexia intervention. That has to be set up in tier 3. Usually in tier 3, we have more time allotted for the intervention to be implemented. And it's usually done as a pull-out, not as something that the teacher does in the classroom, reinforcing what we've learned in tier 1. Is that right? Now, some people in their RTI work have come to believe that when a child is in tier 3, like they've been in tier 1, then they were in tier 2, they didn't get the growth that we needed, so we started them into tier 3, so they moved through the tiers, but we kept doing tier 2 when we started tier 3. So they were getting tier 2, and then they were going out for tier 3. Does that make sense to you? That's not necessary. And if you set your schedule up in such a way that I'm just going to say for 3rd grade, tier 2 and tier 3 are done at a time that overlap for that grade. Because I know if you're in tier 3, you don't have to be in tier 2. So if 3rd grade is going to do tier 2 from 9 to 9:30, okay, then tier 3 is going to go from 9, I hope, to 10. And that's how I just bought an hour. Because they went out for the first half hour when the rest of the kids are still getting tier 2, and then they went into the tier 3 intervention, and it was really only a half hour that they were out of the just general instruction in the classroom because the teacher was doing tier 2 the first half hour. You see what I'm talking about? So I have now bought myself an hour by letting tier 2 and tier 3 overlap with each other for that grade. And the child doesn't have to be in tier 2. He can go on to tier 3 and get going with the intervention and have longer in it. And that is a way better way to set up the schedule and serve the child. So if you're not set up that way and you can't even figure out how to do that, that can be one of those growth things that we get ready for next year or for after Christmas or for however we do. I am not suggesting here on August the 1st that we go in and upset the apple cart and redo the schedule at the school, causing great havoc for everybody. I'm not suggesting that. But I want to paint this picture for you so you realize that that's something to shoot for eventually. Because if I can pull you out of tier 2 and have it already overlapped with tier 3, I can give you an hour. Because tier 3 was going to be a half hour. Now it's really an hour because it trails into tier 2. Did that make sense? Okay. Now, but Spire has it worked out so that you can do any of these. Now, what would the disadvantage of doing a half hour a day and only half the lesson every day be in terms of your outcomes? What do you just think off the top of your head? You won't get through as many levels. That's it exactly. Because it's going to take you, if you would have done 2 levels this year, you'll do 1. Now, when I've looked at STAR scores, and Dyer County uses STAR as a progress monitoring tool and a universal screening tool. So I've looked at a lot of STAR data in context with Spire. So I can tell you how STAR grows when you're in Spire. Okay, here's what I've learned. If I'm going to see a growth of approximately 1 grade level on STAR, we will have finished 1 level in Spire. So finish 1 level in Spire will generally make me show 1 grade level in STAR of growth. 1 level of Spire completed will look in STAR like I grew by a year in STAR. Now, if I do 2 levels, it's 2 years in STAR. If I do 3 levels, I will have closed the gap by 3 years. If you put a child in the intervention and they're reading 2 grade levels below, and you finish 1 level and you make 1 year of growth, you didn't close the gap at all, because all the children got 1 year ahead. And all you did with your intervention was make that child get 1 year ahead, 1 year of growth. But everybody grew by 1 year. So he's still 2 years behind. Did that make sense to you, or do I need to explain it in more detail? 1 year of growth does not close a gap. 2 years of growth shaves a year off the gap. 3 years of growth shaves 2 years off the gap. Are you following me? So if I'm trying to close gaps, then this is the way to do it. Okay? All right. Yeah, I was just saying, it's 10 o'clock. I think this would be a perfect time for a little break. All right? So come back in as close to 10 minutes as you can get back, and we'll jump right back in.